The ACC deadline is passed. Florida State Clemson locked in through at least 2024. How do you respond if you're the SEC to that? Are you going out and continuing to push to get Florida State and Clemson, or are you going to wait and see how the cards fall? The cards are falling pretty quickly, and I have a feeling that in this next offseason, they'll fall quickly as well.
Yeah, so I think you still negotiate. They couldn't figure out a way out of the granted rights deal. Either they couldn't legally do it or they couldn't get enough teams on board. We know that. I think the SEC has to still keep moving. Look, the SEC needs to have back channels with – I'm going to go ahead and say this. They got to keep the Big Ten out of North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. They got to. So they got to be talking to Miami, Florida State, Clemson, UNC. I might even talk to Duke and NC State, and they need to talk to Virginia Tech too. Like, they got to talk to all of those schools and maybe just make an open offer. If all 8 of you kill the granted rights agreement, do a behind the back offer on paper. If you all kill the granted rights agreement, you're in the SEC tomorrow. Now, I know I know they want North Carolina. They would take Florida State and they would love Florida State and Clemson. And I'm sure they'd take Miami and Virginia Tech. So you're already at 5. Just find 3 other teams that may not bring as much value right now, but maybe they do bring more value if they're in the SEC. Like we and Dave, I've talked about this before. You can't just look at the revenue a school's bringing in right now, because if they're in your conference, they might actually bring in more revenue than that directly. So
what would be the ultimate ACC team to lose? What is like immediately you would say fail to the SEC if they lost this ACC team? I'll go with North Carolina. If you lose North Carolina, even though they're not as sexy as Florida State and Clemson, that'd be a big fail. That would be that. You just can't. You don't want to lose North Carolina. What do you think?
I still think it's Florida State. If you lose, and I don't think the Big Ten is going to go for Florida State because they don't have the academics. But if the Big Ten decides to throw academics to the side and not get AAU schools, and Florida State goes to the Big Ten, they're in the heart of one of your peak markets there. Because Florida State, for those who don't, it's not just the Florida market, it's North Florida. So you're talking the Georgia market and the Alabama market. Like, Tallahassee's right there in that Florida-Georgia line next to Alabama. So, I mean, that is the heart of the SEC right there. And where the best recruiting in the SEC is. I mean, I don't know, Dave. You tell me, is the Florida Panhandle or is Miami? Which one has better SEC recruiting? I would say probably the Panhandle, North Florida.
SEC recruiting, the way you qualified that.
Yeah, where SEC teams get, like, load up the most on talent. I would say the Florida Panhandle and that Gulf area right there, South Alabama, Florida Panhandle.
Yeah, if you put the SEC caveat, there are 3 counties around Dade County and in Miami that is the most talent-rich area in the world when it comes to college football or when it comes to football. So, and pardon me, I'm talking about an area in which you could easily drive in a day. Pardon me, because I've done it. But Caleb, as far as SEC recruiting, yes, it's tougher to go into Miami. Why? Because everybody goes to Miami. It's like when it's going to snow and you have to get to the grocery store to get your toilet paper and milk. Everybody's doing it at the same time. And that's what Miami's like. So, yeah, if you put that caveat in there, SEC recruiting, then I could argue the Panhandle is as strong for the conference as is South Florida.
So imagine Florida State and Tallahassee in the Big Ten at that point. Like, imagine that Big Ten country. You can't let Florida State get to the Big Ten. And I think after Florida State, I am with you, North Carolina, and I would say Miami. You can't let Miami or Florida. You don't worry about Georgia Tech. They're not going to the Big Ten. Even though they qualify academically and they bring the Atlanta market, they got to be somewhat decent in football, and they're not. And so Georgia Tech's not going. But, yeah, Florida State and North Carolina. But I would go Florida State at the top.
You and I go back and forth a little bit on Greg Sankey and what he's done for the SEC. I think he's been an incredible positive. Do you have confidence that he will be able to handle the next evolution, which is probably going to happen next year, the next evolution of conference realignment? Which basically means, not to interrupt, which basically means making sure you don't lose somebody from the ACC that you want. We don't know in his mind who he wants. I think it's North Carolina. Some people in the message board think not. You say Florida State. But whoever it is in his mind, that he will not lose those teams to the Big Ten. Do you have confidence that he will do that?
Yes, because I don't want to accuse Greg Sankey of never being forward-thinking. I just think there's been things he did that were not forward-thinking. The ESPN deal was not forward-thinking. The Texas and Oklahoma, and then staying put, not realizing that the Big Ten would counter that and try to expand on their own, was not forward-thinking. I think, but he also was the one who pushed for the 12-team playoff. I don't like the 12-team playoff, but there's no doubt that it benefits the SEC more than any other conference. So I understand why he was pushing the 12-team playoff ahead of everybody else. So I think Sankey is prepared now to do this. And look, things change really fast. I mean, 3 years ago, the Big Ten looked like it was caught flat-footed when the SEC added Texas and Oklahoma. And now the Big Ten looks like geniuses for getting USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. I mean, they got a whole West Coast that they could start right now. And they may add Stanford. I don't know. By the way, as we talk about all this, just a report I want to bring up, George W. Bush and Condoleezza Rice reportedly are in negotiations with Stanford and the ACC to try to get Stanford into the ACC, which is an intriguing fact on its own. But I don't know.
Condoleezza Rice is just like kind of like Clerks, if you remember that. No, it's not Clerks. What's the movie where they stand out in front of the convenience store the whole time? You know, the skinny blonde guy. Help me out on the message board. The skinny blonde guy, Kevin. The producer, director, Kevin, what's his name? Help me, somebody.
This isn't like, I almost said Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but it's obviously not that.
I can't remember his name. He's a great producer. It is Clerks. Kevin, Travis, help me with his name. It's Kevin something. But anyway, the two dudes that just hang outside, that's Condoleezza Rice. Just hangs outside the convenience store where business is happening, hoping that she can have some sort of influence. She was on the college football playoff committee. She just got Jay and Silent Bob. Thank you, Travis. Does she just not have anything else to do?
I mean, you know.
I guess if you had that platform, would you just mess around with college football whenever you got the chance?
I guess. Okay, so, and here's the thing. They got to do this before Stanford gets in, because then that's one less grant of rights, one less team to kill the grant of rights deal. So, Dave, here's the question. You got to raid 8 ACC teams to make sure they can kill the grant of rights deal. 5 bring you value, probably. But if you have to get 8 for the SEC to have a 24-team league, what 8 are you taking?
Oh, my gosh. I don't know. I would have to look at. Do you know them off the top of your head? It's Kevin Smith. Struggled there.
I think you're easily taking Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina. Those are your top 3. And then I think you're taking Virginia Tech. I'm sorry, Virginia. You're taking Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Virginia. Those are your top 4 easily, right? Like, no questions asked.
Yes.
Okay, so the next 4, I think you go ahead and take Miami. Just get Miami in there.
Recruiting.
I think recruiting. I think you go ahead and take Virginia Tech.
Agreed.
And I think you take Duke just for the heck of it, because have a basketball conference. Why not?
Yes.
And then, so you're at 7. I think the last school, you tell me, Louisville or NC State?
Not NC State.
So Louisville. You go Louisville, or Georgia Tech, one of those 3.
Not Tech, Louisville.
So Louisville?
I covered a game, a high school all-star game at Louisville in Papa John Stadium. They didn't have any food for us, so I ordered a pizza to the press box from Domino's, by the way. And their facilities are really nice, and it feels like a Southern school. Here's another one to throw out there if you want to go after a school, but would be West Virginia, which really feels like an SEC school.
But you can't kill the ACC with West Virginia.
Right. Yeah. No, agreed. I just was throwing out schools that feel like SEC schools and have that sort of passionate fan base. So,
I mean, theoretically, I think Notre Dame has voting power on this, so you could try to go after Notre Dame. But I don't know if you can get Notre Dame.
Yeah. Interesting. Notre Dame's going to end up in a bad place if they're not careful. And we talked about that yesterday.